Amen. Thank you. So if you have your Bibles up with me to Hebrews 11, we'll continue our study here in Hebrews 11. It's Faith's Hall of Fame. We're talking about what do we mean when we say we believe in Jesus? What is true faith? What does it look like? What are the characteristics of true faith? And last week we finished up this section on the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then we left off with Joseph in verse 22. And we see all these men, and they had this supernatural faith on their deathbed, where faith is definitely tested the most. And so you see Joseph in his dying words, and he keeps emphasizing to his family that God would surely visit the Hebrew people. He was telling them over and over that God is going to visit you, and He's going to lead them back to the promised land that God promised to their forefathers. And obviously they were supposed to take His bones back with them. So it's going to be a little while. It wasn't going to take His body. They were taking His bones back. So during that time, in verse 22, we're looking at Joseph. The Hebrew people were just a large family. That was the gist of it. They were not yet a nation. They were not so desperate even to leave Egypt at that time. They were in civilization, and to go back to Israel at that time, to Canaan, as it was called then, was to go back to a barren kind of desert. There wasn't anything there. And so they weren't in any big hurry to do that at the time. But as we know, a lot can change in 400 years. And so between verse 22 and 23, there's a 400-year gap. We understand how much things change in 400 years. 400 years ago, there was no United States of America. 400 years ago, we would be in the middle of an untouched wilderness. So 400 years has a lot of things happen there. So we're going to cover that period. What happened between there and verse 23 and leading up to the birth of Moses? Okay, so as we get into verse 23, read this verse. It says, "By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment." So what we're going to talk about is really the faith of Moses' parents. Not Moses yet. We're going to talk about, we're going to set the scene for Moses being born. Okay, there's a lot for us to learn in that. And my studying got paused there before we even got to the birth of Moses. We have to set the scene here. So tonight we're going to see this, that the faith of Moses' parents, their faith is shown by continuing to have kids in a time when worldly wisdom said that was foolish. And you might be thinking, well, hey, they didn't have any way to stop that like we do. They did. They had some ways. It might not have been as effective, but we need to understand that their faith is shown in this. We're going to see this, that one of Satan's most effective attacks on God's people throughout any age has been to stop them from having kids, or just stop them from raising those kids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We're only one generation away from having no church, having no Christianity. We're one generation away. And so this is really what we're looking at tonight is we're studying the enemy, right? We're in a spiritual war. And so we're seeing, what does the enemy's tactics look like? What is his MO? What does he do over and over? And so we're going to look at that. And we need to recognize this, that it is a pagan worldview that says that more kids are inconvenient and expensive. Okay? Now we need to know they are, right? That's true. But we also need to understand that the biblical worldview says, I'm not living for me anyway, right? I mean, we're servants. If you're going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, you're the biggest servant. So you're not here to live for yourself. So the pagan worldview says, it's all about me. that will slow me down. Okay? The Christian worldview is that it's a privilege to raise God's children and to train them to follow Him. The Christian worldview says that the process is God's means of sanctification. Meaning the process of raising those kids is how God makes us into who we are. Now listen, this is something that you're going to have to apply to yourself, okay? This is something that as I'm presenting this, I'm going to ask you for a lot of grace because it can be misunderstood. You can take it and apply it to your personal situation and say, well, he doesn't really get me. Maybe not. Maybe you need to come talk to me about it personally, one-on-one. I'm saying if you don't get what I'm saying, we'll talk about it, okay? But I find this to be a very important thing to talk about, and you'll see more about what I mean. See, here's something we have to admit, all right? The modern Christian church is weak. For the most part, individual Christians are weak. I'm saying, this morning, we read in Philippians where Paul is saying, I want to know the power of Jesus' resurrection. We don't see much of that power right out in front of us anymore, do we? Just obvious and blatant. We don't see new births and revivals taking place and people turning from darkness to light very often. We see it, but it's not as often as we'd like. So why is that? I believe that a lot of that has to do with the fact that as Christians, for the sake of convenience, we've started to dodge our responsibility to fill our quiver with arrows to shoot at the enemy. I'm talking about Psalm 127. It's a blessed thing, a man who has his quiver full. It's a blessed thing to raise children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and they go out into the world as salt and light to fight our enemy, to fight Satan. Okay, so as I say these things, and as we go through this, and I'm making this case, I ask you, again, to stick with me. You might be sitting here thinking, listen, I'm not having no more kids. They might be thinking, that's over for me. Stick with me because there's an application here for you. I promise you. We need to switch. Okay, so that's our title is Correcting a Pagan Worldview. We have slowly slipped into this pagan worldview and we didn't realize it. And we need to turn that ship a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to see is that Moses' parents had every reason to stop having kids, right? I mean, they're having kids that are going to be slaves. They've already got one girl 7 years old in Miriam. They've already got a boy 3 years old in Aaron. And the world says, you're good. You need to stop. But understand that this one arrow that the world says they never should have had was the arrow to the heart of the enemy. It's Moses, who delivered God's people. God used him to preserve the nation that was going to lead to Jesus Christ. Without him, we have no hope. So, again, let me reiterate this. All right, what we're going to talk about tonight is not a command. Okay, it's a principle. And now think about that. This morning, in Sunday morning stuff, we're talking about the gospel. And Jesus says, strive to enter the straight gate. Repent of your sin or go to hell. He says it's a command. It's not something for you to think about. It's not an option. It's just do it. And he's warning us and he's serious about it. Okay? So this is not a command. This is not the same for you as it is for me. It's not the same for everyone. This is a principle that you and I have to decide how it applies to us. And when I say it's a principle, what I mean is some of you just need to think, okay, I need to change my worldview on this so that when I speak to the next generation, I'm speaking wisdom. Okay? There's others of you that are young. Some of you that have got your whole life ahead of you, And you need to see it because this is going to affect your future. You know, I just talking with Josh today, I think this is a message I wish I'd heard 20 years ago. All right, let's get into this. So, verse 23. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents, because they saw he was a proper child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Now, verse 23 is an extremely short summary of some history of the Jewish people that would have been well known to first century Hebrews, to the original audience. What we need to do is turn with me to Exodus chapter 1. That's where we'll spend most of our time tonight. And what we're doing is setting the scene for Moses being born. What is Moses being born into? Okay, so Exodus 1, we're going to make sure that we're made aware of the same history that those Hebrews were aware of. So let's say this again, we looked at Genesis 50 last week. Between Genesis 50 and Joseph's death and the beginning of Exodus, it's a 400-year gap, give or take, about 400 years. Okay, and in those 400 years, a lot has changed. Okay, the Hebrews have grown from a large family into a great people who were big enough to be seen as a completely separate nation from the Egyptians. Okay, here's something else that changed. Their status. Okay, in the end of Genesis 50, the Jewish people were a highly respected royal family, and they were considered saviors of the nation. They were very highly respected. All right, but now, by the time we get to Exodus, they are considered a threatening people. They're outsiders now. They're objects of jealousy and of fear. Okay, so that has changed. Tons have changed for the Jewish people. All right, let's read verses 7 through 10 and see kind of the background here of where Moses is being born into. Exodus 1:7. The children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. They were beginning to outnumber the Egyptians. He says, Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Okay, so the first thing to notice there is that the Jewish people, God's chosen people, have always been a separated people. This is something that Pharaoh noticed instantly, is these people are not like us. They won't assimilate to the culture. Even before the law came, before the Mosaic law came, they wouldn't be a part of culture. They were different. Okay, and it was noticeable. So I want you to notice, especially verse 10. There's some important things we need to see there. Okay, get what Pharaoh noticed was that the Hebrew nation, they were growing in numbers. Okay, and that remained. They remained obviously separated from the Egyptian culture. Okay, he correctly. This was a good observation. This was really worldly wisdom, I guess you would say. He correctly recognized that could become a problem, whether they were in peace or in war. Okay, so if they were in war and an enemy comes against Egypt and they decide, you know what, we're done with these Egyptians anyway. They join up with the enemy. Well, the Egyptians are instantly outnumbered. Instantly, because with the enemy and them, the numbers are too much. Okay, let's say that peace continues in Egypt. If that's the case, then the Hebrews are just going to simply outnumber the citizens of Egypt. The Hebrews are just going to outgrow them, and in a few decades, Egypt would be Israel. So he says, this is a problem. We have to address this. And so what he says is, come let us deal wisely with them. Now notice what he doesn't say. He does not say, kick them out. Right? You wouldn't have to have any wisdom to do that. He doesn't say that. Okay? Notice there, what he says there at the last line of verse 10. He says, and so get them up out of the land. He doesn't want them to leave. Okay? As God promised with the name of Ephraim, we looked at last week. Ephraim, he says, Ephraim means fruitful. Okay? God says, you're going to be fruitful even in the land of your affliction. And they were. They were becoming slaves, and God is making them so fruitful and multiply that they alarm Pharaoh and these Egyptian people. Okay? So the Hebrew population explosion alarmed Pharaoh. He's going, this is a problem. We got to do something. But he didn't want them to leave because he also recognized that the nation was benefited immensely because of them. He realized that everything the Hebrews touched flourished. So we don't want to get rid of them. Okay, so the understand that's exactly what happened with the foreigner, with the people before, isn't it? With Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. You think back, everything that they touched flourished. And the foreigners around them realized, we're blessed because of you. Okay, that's God's blessing on these people. And so Pharaoh recognizes that. Now, let's make an application here to the children of God in any age. Okay, let's think about what does that mean to you and I? Okay, first thing we have to know is that we are meant to always be a separated people. We're meant to be within the world, but not of the world. Now, how that looks, we could take a lot of time to talk about that. We're not going to tonight. But we're never to assimilate to the culture. We're never to blend in. Any effort of the church to blend into society, that's a problem. Our power comes from we're different. We're supposed to be holy and set apart. So we're never to do that, but we are never to be enemies to the people we live with, to the societies we live in. We're never to present ourselves as enemies. We are to be blessings to our community, to our workplaces. You know that you as a Christian should be the hardest worker at your job. You should be the person within your community that everybody looks to and you can find help there. You're a blessing. That's what you're supposed to be as a Christian. You could just simply say, as Jesus does, you're to be salt and light. You're to be preservative to the community. You're to be light into darkness and that kind of thing. So get this straight, okay? If we as Christians are being salt and light as God tells us to be, we will produce the same kind of reaction in unbelievers as these Hebrews did in Pharaoh. All right, here's what that looks like. People should look at us, unbelievers should look at believers, and they should recognize our usefulness, our productivity, our hard work, our good attitude, joy, our peacefulness, the benefits that we give to society. They should see that. That should be obvious. But at the same time, they should see our separation from the culture and our sanctification toward Christ. They should see we're not looking to fit in. We're looking to be more like Christ. Okay? Now, when that happens, that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. And they're not probably going to be able to put their finger on it. Not going to really quite be able to say why, but it's strange. We're strange people. That's okay. That's what we're supposed to be. So keep reading here, and I want you to see Pharaoh's plan of action, and I want you to get this. Pharaoh is acting out of what he thinks is his free will, but I promise you he is a part of Satan's world system. He's being influenced by the powers of darkness because he's fighting God's people. Okay, so look in 11 through 14 shows Pharaoh's plan. Verse 11, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. So here's the plan of action. We're going to work them to death. That's Pharaoh's plan. The thought seems to be, okay, we see you're so productive and useful, so we're going to get the most out of it. We're gonna just work you to death. And so the other side of that is they figuring that slaves don't have much time, energy, motivation, or health to multiply. This is going to stop this population explosion. We'll just work them to death. Okay, well, but we see from verse 12, it didn't work. The more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. So again, God blesses them and puts a stop to Satan's plans. Okay? Now, Satan doesn't give up easily, right? We understand that. As we resist, he resists. Okay? So, verse 15 and 16 shows Pharaoh's, or you could say Satan's, next plan. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. Okay, so this is, the commandment is, when you see the Hebrew women have a son, kill the son. Okay, this is the midwives, the Jewish midwives, he's telling this. He's kind of saying, I'm going to hold you responsible to do this. And this seems to be kind of a quiet commandment. This is not a press release. This is not an open edict to the whole people. He just brings in these representatives of the midwives and he says, this is your job. You keep this quiet and you do this for me. Okay, so he's going to hold them responsible. They're going to have a punishment, I guess, if they don't do it. But the point is, this is a quiet command. Okay, throughout history, we know that there have been kings and rulers. There have been cultures who have killed babies, but nobody's ever really wanted to be known as a baby killer. That's never good PR for a king or a pharaoh or anybody. And even in our time, we see that people who advocate for abortion, they love to call those babies fetuses. You ever notice that? They don't like to use the term baby. They say fetus. And fetus is just a Latin word that means little one. I don't know why that makes it any better. But they feel better about that. So nobody likes to be thought of as a baby killer. And so this is quiet. Okay? If this can work, Satan's going to be okay. And he'll stop. Okay? But it doesn't work. Look at verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men, children alive. So Pharaoh's plan, if it had been successful, all the promises to Abraham, all the promises to the whole world would never have been completed. The Messiah never comes. The Jewish people are gone. If they don't have any male children, the girls just marry into Egypt. That was the plan, just to assimilate them into the culture, and the Hebrew nation is gone. Okay, so God doesn't have a people. But these midwives, their faith, God used them. Their faith saved the nation. Their faith saved God's plan. And so we need to get this. I love that line there. It says, but the midwives feared God. They feared God, not man. They said, you know what, King of Egypt, you do your worst. I'm going to fear God. We need to get that we're studying true faith. True faith is always accompanied by a healthy fear of God. We need to make sure we understand God is still God. He's all powerful. Okay, so keep looking here in 18 through 20, and we see that Pharaoh sees that this plan isn't going to work because the Hebrew women just don't even need the midwives. 18, it says, and the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have you done this thing and have saved the men, children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come unto them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives. So it says the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. Okay, so this plan isn't going to work. Okay, the quiet killing is not going to get the job done. So look at here in verse 22 is Pharaoh's next move. Okay, this is Satan's next move. And it goes from quiet baby killing to just all-out viciousness. Verse 22. And Pharaoh, get this, hear this now, charged all his people, saying, every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. So what Pharaoh does is he makes every person in his that are Egyptian, they're now informants. They're not the ones that are going to carry out the orders. They're the informants. I mean, how easy is this? You see a Hebrew woman and she's pregnant. And you're paying attention. Is she going to bring out a baby before long? Is that baby a female? Okay, if it's not a little girl, you're in trouble. Because somebody's going to see it. And no doubt, as has been the case in so many cultures, these informants had some incentives. They made it worth their time and effort to tell on their neighbors. And so this plan is put into effect. Now get this. That's the world that Moses is born into. That kind of thing is going on when Moses is born. Okay, so let's sum up what we see. Here's where I want to stop the narrative and make some application. But let's summarize what have we seen in this story in Exodus 1. It's this. Satan will stop at nothing to stop God's plans. There's no like, oh, well, I give up. That doesn't happen. If one plan fails to stop God's will, Satan's mask as an angel of light will start to come off until Satan is fully exposed in all his viciousness. If one plan doesn't work, he'll move to the next. Okay? And we see that happening here. Now, let's make an application to the modern American church. What does this mean to us? And here's the point I want to make to you is that Satan has used this same plan of attack for new covenant believers just like us. And he's used it very well. Now let me show you what I mean. Follow kind of the history of the church. Okay? When the church is first born just after Acts 2 with Pentecost, okay, Christians are clearly a separated people from unbelievers. Now they're made up of Jews and Gentiles and slaves and free people, and it was just this mashup of cultures, but they were separated in that they were all followers of Christ. Now, they were separate from unbelievers, and at the same time, they were also a blessing to the nations they were in. Wherever they went, they were blessed. They were a blessing, okay? So just like the Jewish people, that's how it worked. Satan's first plan to destroy the church, to destroy God's plan, is to assimilate Christians into his world system. That's the plan. Now we know that never really worked at all. And as he did it, as he tried to do that in Egypt, he tried to do it in the first century. Okay? But understand that Satan has gotten more subtle throughout the centuries. Okay? He's got the advantage of time. We live one lifetime and we have to learn from history and that's it. He's got centuries. He's an eternal being. He can see it and perfect it. We have to understand our enemy. Okay? So what happened was when Satan could not kill Christianity in its infancy, he made Rome a Christian nation. Sort of. He had the emperor decide he's a Christian. And so then he sort of, he saw, okay, I can't bring the church into the world. They won't come. I'm going to bring the world into the church. And so the Roman Catholic Church is born. We went through 1,000 years of heresies and with a few bright lights in there in history. So that was the first plan, and that worked fairly well. Okay, let's come up to our time. Okay, that's what he did in Rome. He brought the world into the church. All right, let's come up to modern America. Okay, that same strategy that Satan used, he's used it successfully in America. Now let me tell you what I mean. Okay, when you think of politically conservative Americans, okay, most politically conservative Americans call themselves Christians. Okay, now I don't believe they all are. For a second, we talked about this morning that many will say, Lord, Lord, and not be His kingdom at all, not be His children. Okay? But that's what they're saying. They're saying that we're Christians. So Satan has kind of brought the world into the church in that sense. He's married these two worlds together. And this crowd, they live for Satan and not Christ. They're not following Christ, as we saw this morning. And they associate being a good American with being a Christian. Okay, understand, those people that are just, you would call them moderate Christians, they'll say, I'm a Christian in name only, and they associate this political conservatism with Christianity, they're not going to feel the wrath of Satan. Satan already has them. Understand that if Israel had assimilated to the culture, there had been no slavery. There would have been no need for Pharaoh to say, we're going to do something about this, because they were assimilated. They were a part of it. So Satan, when he sees people say, yeah, we're politically conservative Americans, then all of a sudden they're like, okay, Satan's good. He eases up on them. Okay? Now, if that doesn't work on you, here's the next plan. Okay, if you're still a separated person, you're going, I'm American and I'm glad I'm from here and that's great. We're blessed, but I'm more Christian than I'm American. Satan ain't going to like that. So he moves on to the next plan. Okay, what he's going to do then is just like Pharaoh put these people into slavery, he's going to tell you and I, you need to work harder. What he's saying is, he'll say, and he doesn't use slavery and a taskmaster like he did. Again, he's more subtle than that. He says, you need to chase the American dream. You need to make more money. You need more stuff. That's happiness. You deserve it. That's what he'll say. Okay, what's he doing the whole time? He's taking your eyes off of what is God's will. The whole time, you get so busy and you get so bogged down and you become a slave, not to a taskmaster, but to debt. And you're bogged down in this stuff. And you forget about what is God's will for my life. What am I supposed to be doing? Satan will tell you that, it's okay to miss church so your kids can play sports. He'll tell you that it's okay. You don't need to worry about family worship because the church will handle that. You're too busy anyway. Leave it to the pros, he says. He'll tell you, hey, they made a profession of faith already, so it's no big deal. Just relax. That's the wide gate, by the way. That's the wide gate that leads to hell. Just relax. They made a profession of faith. Don't worry about it. Satan will do this. He'll try to make you too busy to follow Christ. And the next step is he will make you too spiritually unhealthy from overexposure from his world system to even want to follow Christ. What I mean is he changes your desires and your appetites. You get so used to the world that the things of God that are holy and pure and true, they don't really even appeal anymore. You love what's not lovely. That's the plan. He just like being a slave, he wants to make them too tired to produce more Christians. Okay, now listen, that was Satan's plan for Israel and Egypt, and it didn't work on them. God blessed them over and abundantly no matter what. Here's the question. Has it worked on us? Are we the crowd that have gotten so bogged down in I gotta have more stuff. I gotta keep this particular lifestyle. I've got to buy these things. I gotta pay these bills. There's this expectation of the way that things should be, and we've forgotten completely that our one job is to disciple these souls that God has given us. Did it work on us? And now listen, don't think I'm pointing fingers here. I'm preaching to me. All right? I never heard this. I'm not pointing fingers, all right? And what I'm saying is we need to recognize that we have adopted a pagan worldview of family, finances, children. We've adopted it. It's just seeped right into us. Okay? So get this. Here's where we're at. Okay, we talked about the quiet killing stage where Pharaoh just brings the midwives in real quietly. He says, listen, I want you guys to go and kill the baby boys. Keep it quiet. That's where we're at in America. We're at the quiet killing stage. What I mean is there is nothing on the news, there's no laws put out that says, listen, Christians, stop discipling your kids. There's nothing like that, right? Satan knows that's going to raise your antennas and you're going to have a revolt. You're really going to flip out. He's trying to deal with you wisely. And he is, subtly, as Pharaoh was doing. Okay, Satan has refined his efforts since Egypt. He knows that we're not going to give in to some things. He knows that we're against abortion. He knows we're against a lot of things like that. So what he does is he doesn't say, stop having kids, Christians. He doesn't, these laws they used to have in China, you can only have one baby, he doesn't do that. Okay, he knows that you wouldn't stand for that. But what he does is he just points out to you that babies cost a lot of money. And they take up a lot of your personal time. That's what he does. So he doesn't have to make laws. He doesn't have to get serious and vicious about it. He just appeals to our love of self in reality. Understand this, guys. Listen. Here's some of Satan's most effective lies that is destroying the American church right now. One is this, that you need to wait until your 30s to have kids so you can enjoy your 20s. And again, I want you to stick with me. You might be sitting there going, I'm way past that. Listen, stick with me. There is an application for all of us. Here's another lie. That having any more than 2 or at the most 3 kids is just irresponsible. And we'll say, well, in reality, we won't say it, but in reality we think, well, it's just inconvenient. Because we love self. We're worried about self. We're not worried about what does God say. Now, here's the thing. There's a ditch on the other side, right? I'm not advocating for every person having 15 kids. I'm not saying that. All right? There is something we have to understand what is God's will for us. Okay? But modern Christians, we ignore some very basic biblical principles in the way that we look at kids and family. Let me give you one. Go with me to Psalm 127. This is probably a familiar passage to most of you. Psalm 127. I want to read verses 4 and 5. This is just basic biblical Christianity when looking at children. And it's basically this, that children are a blessing from God. Okay, Psalm 127, 4. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. That speak with the enemies in the gate is saying this man will be ruler in his people. The man who is able to build up and bring up his children, the nurture and admonition of the Lord, he's going to be the ruler. He's going to be the one in charge. What he's saying is, Christians, if you can raise the next generation to follow Christ, you're going to have more influence in the world. You're going to be saltier. You're going to be a brighter light. I love this analogy. You see this picture of arrows in the hand of a mighty man. Get this picture, okay? This is not a man who has no idea how to shoot. This is not a man who walks through the woods and picks up some sticks and thinks, yeah, close enough, and uses that for an arrow. This is a man who knows what he's doing. He picks up the wood and he shapes it perfectly. It takes a lot of time to make arrows. If you're going to make arrows by hand, I don't know, I've never done it. But let me tell you, can you imagine how long that would take and how perfect that job has to be? To sharpen those arrows, to make them perfect, to make them fly straight. And then, he's no dummy when it comes to firing them. He knows where he's looking, he knows where he's pointing, he knows what he's going to shoot at. The picture is of a man who has children when he's young, when he's in his youth, and he loves it, and he's got energy, and he can go and he can shape them and mold them and disciple them. And then when they get grown, they fire right at Satan's heart and destroy the enemy. in that generation. Hey, folks, that's the goal. Did you know that the goal is not to gain more stuff? The goal is not to have more time for your hobbies. The goal is to fire more shots at the enemy. Make a bigger difference in this sorry world we live in. We're all going, man, the world's just going to pot, man. It's bad shape. Why? We're not doing our job. Look, he's saying this is a wonderful thing. He's saying we've adopted a pagan mindset. We've adopted this worldview where we say, oh, that's just too much work. That's too much to deal with. But he says, no, children are a blessing. If you raise them right. I love this term. This has been on my mind lately. I want to baptize our children in love and in truth. Both. Baptism, I mean immerse them in love and in truth. Make them love the things that are lovely. Make them hate the things that are hateful. Give them the right affections in life. I want you to give you one more place here. Go to 1 Timothy with me. Here's something else we ignore. Okay? In 1 Timothy 2, we went through this a few months ago. Maybe it's been a year ago. It's been a while. We've been in 1 Timothy for a while. But we went through this in detail. And we're not going to dig into it real hard, but the basic gist of it is this, that children are God's instruments of sanctification for the parents. You think, I'm raising my kids and that's good for them. No, it's good for you. We need to get back to understanding this, that raising children is for the parents as much as it is for the kids, and especially for the mother. It says, verse 15 says, notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith and in charity and holiness with sobriety. Now, we've talked about this. This is not salvation by having children. That's ridiculous. It's not God's plan for everybody to have children. Okay? But he's saying on a normal basis, the general rule is that God gives motherhood to women to sanctify them, to build them up. What he's saying is the childbearing. This is not just having kids and then it's over with. This is raising them in the nurture and admonition of God. Okay, and that's what he's saying is that is the blessing. The blessing is raising them to follow Christ. And get this, what we've done so often is we've taken Satan's easy way. You know, when it comes to raising kids, it's hard, but it's good. Just because things are hard does not mean they're bad. As a matter of fact, that's usually the opposite. And so we've dodged God's way of doing things. So here's where we're at. Okay? We just need to realize this. We need to realize that Satan has not had to be openly hostile to Christians in America yet, because his first plans have worked so well. He hasn't had to take the mask off. He hasn't had to make laws. He hasn't had to send persecution to the church directly because we've took the bait. Between allowing Satan's world system to raise our kids and just not having them, not having any, for the sake of convenience and comfort, what has happened is Satan has assimilated Christianity to the culture and almost obliterated true Christians from America and from the Western world. I mean, when we look at what Jesus says, I mean, listen, how many times have you heard a message preached on John or on Matthew 7:21 through 23? It's not a popular thing to say that most people who profess Christ are going to hell, is it? But it's there. And how is it that that's possible? Things like this, we take the bait. All right, so what do we do? Let me give you 3 things that I think we need to think about. Number 1 is this. Instead of asking, how can we get kids here? Don't ask that. Okay? That's always the question. How do we get more young people in church? Okay, that's a good motive. That's a good thing to want. But instead of asking, how do we get more kids in church, we need to ask, why won't my kids come to church? Are my kids coming? Are they a faithful member of a church somewhere? We need to ask, why is it that we are bleeding generations? What's happened? That's what we got to ask. Here's what we need to do. We need to take back the responsibility of discipling our own kids. The church is not built to disciple the kids. The church is built to be a helper, but it's the parents' job. We need to stop believing the lie that somebody else will disciple our kids and a profession of faith is good enough. We can't take any comfort that someone has a profession of faith. We just saw that this morning, didn't we? Jesus warns clearly, not all who say, Lord, Lord, are going to enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, here's number 2. We need to realize that the worldview that says that children are a nuisance and only have enough, that we should only have enough to make us happy, that's a pagan worldview. See, it's kind of like the worldview that talks about marriage as marriage is there to make you happy. No, it's not. It's there to make your spouse happy. Okay, in the same way, now you have, if you're married, now you have kids, not to make you happy, to follow Jesus Christ, to make them happy. Okay, get this. Satan's most effective lie to kill the true church and its influence is just that. Just get rid of the next generation. That's what he was doing in Egypt, wasn't it? Didn't work. Seems like it's working too often on us. Here's the next thing. The last thing I want you to see, number 3. We need to adjust our worldview, our expectations of life as Americans. We're unbelievably blessed, aren't we? We need to make sure we understand that we're not here to have fun. We're not here to preserve our own comfort. God didn't save us and leave us on this earth to make ourselves happy, to make ourselves amused. We're here to serve God. We're here to raise His children. They're not ours. We're here to raise them in His nurture and admonition. And that's one of the best ways to serve Him. I want you to go back there to Hebrews. You've probably almost forgot the verse we started in. Hebrews 11:23. Think about this again. And we're going to revisit this. This will be our subject next week too. Not this particular subject, but this verse. He says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Now get this again. Listen, I've thought this. The thought is, man, these are bad times to be raising kids, and these are bad times to bring a kid into the world, right? No, it's not. That was a bad time to bring kids into the world. They're going to be slaves, and there's a death threat on, not just a death threat, it's a death sentence. The kid comes out a boy, he's supposed to be killed by the law. Not only that, they're going to put their other children in danger. You got 2 more kids that are going to be maybe orphans because mom and dad are going to violate this law. The king's pretty serious about it. If anybody ever had a reason to think, we don't need kids, we don't need to have any more kids, it was Moses' parents. Here's where you need to get, okay? One is we all need to change our worldview on family, on children, okay? But think about this. Some of you are going, man, I'm past that point. My grandkids are grown, you might be thinking. Okay? Think of it this way. Okay? What can you do to help those who have kids? Okay? When you look around, I mean, you know what it's like. Those of you who have raised kids, you understand. Man, it gets busy. It gets tough. There's a lot going on. You get overwhelmed sometimes. What can you do to help? Okay, that's some of you. There's others of you that are young. You got your whole life ahead of you. Okay, this can change your future. if you'll understand this and grab a hold of it and get that we're not here to have fun. You're not here to be amused. We're not here to please ourselves. We're here to live for others and to serve Christ. How does this affect you? Listen, if this seems unclear, if this seems like a reach, if this seems just kind of crazy talk, I want you to come talk to me about it. I'm not here to put anybody down. I'm not here to bring up any past. I'm not here to point any fingers. I just want to show you the truth of the Word of God. And we need to reform our worldview and our minds. You know, when we hear biblical truth and it seems radical, what's that say about us? I'm not giving you my opinion here. I'm reading you Bible verses. Come talk to me about it if you like. I'd love to talk about it anyway. But Stoney, birthday boy, would you lead us in prayer, brother? Dismiss us.